Hello. Welcome back to our Wednesday Bible study podcast. Adjust my mic here a little bit. Thanks for joining me today after a week off. It's good to be back with you. We were able to, in spite of ice storms and blizzards, able to get away down to Florida with just my wife and I for a week, and we really had a nice time relaxing and just kind of unplugging, I guess. And so appreciate the church allowing us to have that time off. As it turned out, there was no Sunday services, so I guess it was a good time to get away. That said, it is good to be back home, good to be back in my office here, preparing for this today and doing hospital visitations and contacting people. So it's not a big drudge for me, drudgery. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Not a big drudgery for me to be back at work. So because I really love what I do. So we're going to continue in this series, weird, wild, and wacky things about the Bible or questions about the Bible. Today, this one is based really almost entirely on Bible prophecy. Once again, this subject is not central to our faith, but it is interesting and kind of amazing to me how many people sort of outside of the faith, maybe those who are interested in Christ but haven't fully made a commitment to Him yet, will ask me questions about prophecy. I get questions from people who really aren't part of a church, way more than I do from people who are part of a church about Bible prophecy. And maybe this is because as Christians, in the end we just have faith in Christ and we're not as fearful of the future, just knowing Christ is going to work all things out. We have Him in His hands. I'm not sure. But it is, actually prophecy is one of the main reasons for it is to speak to those who aren't Christians to prove the power and the foreknowledge of the Lord. So today, though, it has definite prophetical, as we talk about the 10 kings today, it has almost entirely future application or future prophetical, it hasn't come to take place yet. And it's also something not worth fighting over. I saw a post recently. It said, "Stop arguing about Bible translations when you don't read any of them." I don't know if that's true of everybody, but it is true of some people. They don't ever bother to read the Bible. They're going to argue about it, the translation or whatever, and aren't really applying the basics of the Bible, but they're arguing over the less clear things. So. That said, we can certainly disagree. People can disagree on matters like this in our discussion today, and most all of the discussions I'm doing in the series, you can disagree about for sure. We don't break fellowship over these things, and in due time, prophecy is going to reveal itself. So we'll know the truth one day, either in heaven, where we ask Jesus what He meant, or we see it take place in the world around us. We'll know it will be revealed fully. So once again, today I'm going to talk about the 10 kings mentioned in Bible prophecy, and this concept of 10 rulers or 10 authorities or 10 kingdoms at the end of this age. It's not the end of the world, because the world will go on long past when the Antichrist is in the lake of fire. So, but it is the end of this age, when before the second return of Christ. And this concept is found a few times in the Bible, not just in the book of Revelation. In fact, it's probably more in Daniel, or at least as much in Daniel that talks about this than in Revelations. So let's take a look at the scriptures first before we talk about the theories. First of all, we're going to go to Daniel 7:7. Daniel says, "After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, He's seen three beasts leading up to this. Dreadful and terrible this fourth beast is, and extremely strong. And it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts before it. It had 10 horns. And while I was thinking about the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the previous horns were plucked out before it. And behold, the horn possessed eyes like human eyes, and the mouth uttering great boasts. Kind of weird, a horn growing and has eyes and a mouth, right? Then the vision is clarified in Daniel 7:23. The angel tells Daniel, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and trample it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them. And he will be different from the previous ones, and he will humble 3 kings. Now, Revelation also will talk to us a little bit about. Actually, we're going to come back to Daniel in a minute, but Revelation chapter 17 says, John writes, and he says, here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the woman sits. So he sees this vision of the woman called the woman of Babylon. There's another word, I guess. I mean, I'm afraid to use it. I just don't want to get dinged by YouTube here. So that said, he's kind of explaining this vision that John has. The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. Okay, when he comes, the last kingdom, talking about the Antichrist. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7, and goes to destruction. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have not yet received a kingdom. There we go. 10 horns. He sees on this beast 10 horns. There are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. But they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. And 1 hour there just means a short time. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. And we're going to jump back to Daniel. And just as you saw that the feet, and this is when Daniel has the vision of this great statue, and has a head of gold and a torso of silver and the bronze middle, and then the feet are made of iron. And then the toes, he goes on to talk about the toes. And just as you saw that the feet and toes were made partly of fired clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. The legs divide as the Roman Empire divided into the east and the west, and spent most of its time as a divided kingdom. And yet some strength of iron will be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. So here's the important thing there is to think of the 10 toes. And he says, as you saw the iron mixed with clay, so the peoples will mix with one another, but will not hold together any more than iron mixes with clay. And you kind of see this a little bit today, especially in Europe, as there's so many Muslims moving into Europe, and they both represent portions of the old Roman Empire, but they're not mixing together very well. And then one more scripture I think I got 2 more, both out of Revelation. Revelation 13, it says, I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 crowns, and on his heads were blasphemous names. The beast I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like those of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne with great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been fatally wounded, and his fatal wound was healed. And the whole earth was amazed and followed after this beast. They worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him? And so again here there's 10 horns and 10 crowns. And then one more scripture, Revelation 12:3. Then another sign appeared in heaven, And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 crowns. So we have heads and toes, crowns and horns. And by the way, and I do believe they all represent the same dynamic, the same prophecy that's going to be fulfilled. The 7 heads and the 7 mountains could mean the same thing as well. I think that probably the mountains especially represent the 7 continents of Earth. So, they didn't have a word for continent back then, so it's just 7 land masses. That's a very good possibility. So when I do read these scriptures throughout, and I read several from Daniel and Revelation, there's this idea of 10 that keeps reappearing, and it's really focused on kingdoms and powers and authorities. That there'll be 10 of them. So let's talk about theories. What are these? Who are these 10 rulers, kingdoms, powers that come? The first one, and then I'm going to tell you what I think is probably, in my opinion, the most logical when we're done with the theories. The first one is that they are 10 regions of the earth. And this is probably, at one point, it definitely was the most common interpretation. I don't know if it is anymore, but it's certainly a very common one. It really gained a lot of traction. In 1968, there was a group called the Club of Rome that's formed. It still exists, still definitely full of some movers and shakers. And their purpose was to influence global discourse, and it says on the website, on sustainable development and governance. They always like to use these words that can be nebulous and mean many different things. It says on the website, it was established by a group of prominent individuals from various sectors, including science, politics, and business. Its inception aimed to address the pressing issues arising from rapid population growth, resource depletion, and environmental degradation. The Club of Rome seeks to bring together experts to analyze global challenges and propose solutions through collaborative efforts, fostering dialogue and action amongst worldwide leaders. So one of the things, why do I bring up the Club of Rome? Well, one of their proposals, going back, I think they first proposed it in the early 70s, was to reorganize all the global governance of the world into 10 regional governances. So in other words, there would be the North American Union. We have, one of their proposals was the European Union, which we have today. The North American Union, the South American, and anyway, African, it goes on there. There's 10, I'm sorry. You get those two numbers mixed up. Areas that they proposed. And that was aimed at, yes, addressing the challenges of modern life or modern global life. So the classifications of these segments into 10 regions could be considered kingdoms for sure. It just reminds a lot of people of these 10 kings or these 10 rulers that was spoken of in Revelation and Daniel. And they say the intent behind this framework is to streamline international cooperation and enhance governance efficiency on a global scale. In other words, they're globalists who don't like nations ruling themselves. They want one world government kind of thing. And that's what globalism is. The membership in the Club of Rome has included many people, prime ministers, royalty through the years. Some kind of well-known names: Mikhail Gorbachev, Pierre Trudeau. He is the father of Justin Trudeau, or was the father of Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada. But he was also, at this moment, he was part of the Club of Rome, was the Prime Minister of Canada. The President of Germany for a while, Horst Kohler, was part of it, along with, like the King of France and the Princess of Norway and different people in the Middle East. Different people have been involved with it. Very concerned about population control, depopulating. Well, how do you depopulate people? That's a fancy word of eliminating, or that's even a fancy word for killing people. So that was one of their big focuses, but also just globalism. And now I'm not saying that if this is the truth of what the Bible was talking about, these 10 kingdoms, that the Club of Rome is going to be that impetus. But it just shows just the thought process behind, well, first of all, behind Satan, because he's behind globalism, ultimately, going back to the Tower of Babel, one world, one government, like the Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. That goes all the way back, and if it's not Jesus going to be king of the earth, then no one should be king of the earth, right? That's what the Bible teaches. So, but we call this globalism today, and this is it's really explains globalism does, and a lot of what's going on in our nation right now, because we have a president who, by all appearances, fights against globalism. He just got us out of the United Nations. And so when a large nation, especially like America or Russia or any nation that's big like that, fights against globalism, well, this is going to set their mind on edge, and they're going to use all their powers and all their resources to fight that, because that's their ultimate goal. If you're a globalist, and that's many world leaders today are globalists. So that's one of the theories, that there's going to be 10 regions, and it's going to be, they're going to rule the world, if you will. The second theory is that there are actually 10 regions of the old Roman Empire, that they don't cover the whole earth, but they're just regions of the Roman Empire. Some people thought that since the vision of Daniel and the large statue, the legs represent Rome, as I mentioned earlier. It was the first is Babylon, then Persia, then Greece, and then Rome. Then it comes down to the legs where the kingdom was divided in two, and then it mixes with iron and clay and becomes the 10 toes. And so they think, well, it's not the whole world, it's just the leftover vestiges of the Roman Empire. There was a point where the European common market was 10 nations, and people said, oh, that's it. Well, today it's like 30-some nations. So, and the European Union's the same way. So the thought is that while the Antichrist may exert his power over all the earth, he's certainly going to try to influence everything on the earth. That he will come from somewhere within that old Roman Empire, and he's going to receive his power and his title from that region. And that this region will be divided into 10 kingdoms. Instead, today, the region that would be considered the old Roman Empire would make up 52 different nations today that are part of that. So this idea fits in nicely with the 10 toes, okay, that this is going to come from the Roman Empire. Those who object to this and say, no, that the power of the Antichrist is going to include the whole earth, not just Europe and the Middle East, they would say that the Roman Empire in its essence has continued today through many dominating empires that are just an extension of that Roman Empire, including the empires of Britain and France and Turkey. Turkey would have been called the Ottoman Empire back just even in World War I, it was called that. Spain, Germany, Portugal, and yes, America, and that they believe that's also part of the Roman Empire extended, if you will. Its influence is extended, not just in some smaller area of Europe and North Africa. So they would say, no, it's not just coming from there; it's coming from a much broader area. Probably most of the Western Hemisphere and Europe and the Middle East all would be part of the extension of the Roman Empire. Daniel 7:23 says, the angel gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth, and it will be different from the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. So people who would say, no, the Antichrist is only over Europe and only over Europe and the Middle East, they would say, well, if they disagree with that, they would look to that scripture and say it says he's going to devour the whole earth. He's going to be, in their minds, interpreting that ruling over all the earth. Other people say, no, that's not what it means. It simply means he's going to terrorize it. He's going to affect the whole earth. That he is going to rule from a certain area, but that through his influence and through his power, he's going to kind of put his thumb on the rest of the earth. For example, it was once said at different times that Britain ruled the seas or ruled the world, really. It's been said even recently that America rules the world. Neither are exactly true, are they? Neither have ever ruled the whole world. But it's another way to say they've been the most powerful. They've exerted the most influence. And so, is that possibly what the Bible is saying about the Antichrist? Yes, that's a possibility. It could be true of him, that he may not actually rule over all of the world. He may only rule over an important portion of it. So there's no doubt about it. There are several places that describe nations warring with him. Well, if you rule over the whole world, how do they war with you? I guess it could be a rebellion, an uprising. This could be closer to the truth, that the 10 kings are rulers over only a certain area, only maybe Europe and the Middle East. The third theory is that these 10 rulers are given the 10 toes, the 10 crowns actually stand for 10 people. They're not kingdoms or nations, they're 10 people, and they're given power over areas of the world. It's a little bit different, similar to the 10 nations or the 10 regions, but that the 10 rulers empower the Antichrist to take power himself. They're presidents, prime ministers, kings, dictators. Let's just imagine, if you will, I'm just going to pick maybe the 10 most powerful nations in the world. Let's say the heads of state of China, America, Russia, France, Britain, India, Germany, Brazil, Turkey, and Japan all simply declared some sort of national emergency. And they suspended their elections. They suspended their legislative bodies, their parliaments and their congresses, their senates, and they turned the keys over to someone who promised peace and safety and security, promised answers, promised help. This would only happen after like a massive, a worldwide event, like World War III, or a massive asteroid hit the world, or the rapture, or an alien invasion. If you remember, I talked about aliens 2 or 3 weeks ago. Well, the rest of the world, if those nations decided he's got the power, the rest of the world would just have to go along. I mean, what's Iceland or the Philippines or Nigeria going to be able to do to resist? So that's the third idea, is that it's just some presidents, heads of states, kings who kind of suspend all normalcy in their nation because of some tragic event, and then they just hand over, and the rest of the world has to go along with it. The fourth theory is that these 10 kings are 10 powerful technocrats or billionaires. They're not normal rulers at all. It calls them at one point kings without a kingdom. And so that's part of got people thinking, well, is this even kingdoms in the way we think of them, or kings in the way we think of them? Maybe they're just 10 people. For example, some billionaires like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and George Soros and Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Jensen Huang, Mark Zuckerberg, Changpeng Zhao, Zhong Shanshan. Hopefully I say those Chinese names right. Some very rich individuals. Warren Buffett. There's other influential people, very powerful, that may not be billionaires, but they exert an enormous amount of influence, like Yuval Harari or Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia. Ursula von der Leyen, she's the head of the EU. Tedros Adhanom, I can't say his name. He's the guy that's head of the WHO, the World Health Organization. Zoran Mondani, the mayor of New York. Tim Cook, the head of Apple. Ted Sarandos, the head of Netflix. Larry Fink, he's the head of BlackRock. And Klaus and Olivier Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum. These people are really, in many cases, the true power brokers. And they can use their money, influence, and connections to force their way especially if they combine together, they're more powerful than a lot of times prime ministers and presidents. There's been probably some leaders of some very powerful nations that just took their cues and their orders from individuals like this, or ones that have are no longer with us. The Rockefellers and the whatnot through the years. And that's not just America; it's other nations as well. And so this idea has kind of gained traction in the last few years, as we've sort of seen the behind the curtain, if you will. We've seen what's out there, and that there's a lot of situations that it's not even our elected officials or not even the people we see as the head of nations who are really in control. It's other people. It's also interesting that the Antichrist, he actually seems to dispose of 3 of these other kings and does away with them. And I think it's a little easier to do away with a technocrat, 1 or 2 or 3 of them, than an entire region of the world. Although perhaps maybe if they were actual rulers, it's not so hard. If it's an actual person who's a king or a president, he may be able to get rid of them. But it's interesting that the Antichrist comes in and just does away with 3 of them. So this idea that the technocrat, the billionaire, the power behind the curtain, if you will, is who the Bible's talking about. There's 10 of these individuals that band together and try to exert control over the world by bringing in this charismatic person to be the world's leader. The 5th idea is that these are actually 10 historical kingdoms throughout history. And I think this theory takes a little bit of liberty with the idea of the 10 kings, and it's based on the idea that there have been 10 kingdoms or empires, nations that have rose from the Roman Empire since the fall of Rome, and they have exerted great power over the earth, especially the West, especially the Western, from Europe over to this hemisphere, and especially over the Holy Land, and over the area where the church was. And these kingdoms that people point to would be Italy, Germany, Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, America, the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and the Holy Roman Empire. And the thought would be that 3 of those, the Ottoman, the Byzantine, and the Holy Roman Empire, have already dead. And the Antichrist is going to rule with power given to him by the remaining 7. I think this is a little bit of a stretch for me, since some of these empires seem to be overlapping in territory through the years. And I don't see how the Antichrist had anything to do with the fall of the Byzantine or the Ottoman or the Holy Roman Empire, since some of them fell a millennium ago. The Byzantine Empire did. So he's not... The Antichrist hasn't even come to power yet. How could he have anything to do with the fall of those 3? It is interesting to note that there have been 10 great empires that have come out of the influence of the Roman Empire. Because the Roman Empire, these other nations grew and became strong, and that's where America came from. We first were birthed out of that European Roman Empire, old Roman Empire. So John Lennon said, "If I'd lived in the Roman times, I'd have lived in Rome. Where else? Today, America is the Roman Empire, and New York is Rome itself." Well, interesting. Certainly, though, if you look back through history and what Western civilization is, which America is a part of, it's all birthed out of that Roman Empire. So my thoughts, those are the views of the 10 kings. My thoughts is that I lean toward the technocrat view, the billionaire view, that it will be 10 powerful people who step in, kings without a kingdom. That could definitely describe some people today, and I'm not saying that they're it, but certainly they are kings without a kingdom in the sense that they rule and they have power and they exert and they use their money and their influence to shape public policy, to influence elections, to direct people who are elected to vote and go certain ways. So I tend to think that actually sounds the most logical and reasonable description of these 10 individuals who end up standing, in some sort of traumatic time. Whether it could be anything, like I said, World War III, it could be the rapture, it could be, a huge natural disaster, or a pandemic way worse than what we just had. If something like that came, that they would stand in and say, we need to have, and we're going to appoint this person, and he's going to be the leader that's going to lead us out of this traumatic time. And of course, they would expect to keep the power themselves. This person will be a figurehead, but the Antichrist he's going to bite the hand that feeds them, if you will. He's going to be careful what you wish for. He evidently may take 3 of them out in the process, and end up being not controlled by them, but they will be controlled by him. So that's kind of where I lean. But is that you may think something different? You may not have ever thought about this before. Probably that fits a lot of people. But as we get as time progresses, we do have a little bit better understanding, and we can see how the theory that I just described could possibly be the most logical and what the Bible is describing. Time will tell. We will see. Hopefully, you and I will be able to see how this fulfills itself when we're in heaven, right? And that we won't actually be here, but this could happen. Some of this could happen before then, too. We don't know. That's a whole nother discussion, right? So we're not going to go into that today, but just some interesting stuff I have seen. Part of the reason why I want to talk about some of these things is because I see it discussed a lot on online, I guess, just in different venues, whether it be blogging, vlogging, or whether it be on chat boards and stuff like that. So just going to try to address some of these things, especially people who are, wanting to know have out of the ordinary questions about what things mean. That's what this series is about. So thanks again for joining me. I hope that, Lord willing, it looks like we're going to be good to go for Sunday morning. Be live streaming back here again with our normal service. So hopefully you can join us for that. Otherwise, thanks for joining me today. God bless.